I come from a time where training grounds was called terrorist hunt. I come from a time where unranked/quick match was called casual. I come from a time when ranked was in beta for 3 years. Rainbow Six Siege has changed, and not for the better, I'm afraid. Let's talk about it. Remember when you could see the KD of people? Remember when you could see the rank, when you could see the level, when you could mess with people? Where people got doxxed very often, no matter what system you were on? Remember when Jaeger had an ACOG site? Remember when Ash had an ACOG site? Remember when the SMG-11 had an ACOG site? Remember when the SMG-11 didn't have any recoil? Remember when shields could quick shoot? Remember when they could hit fire and hit anything? Remember before Operation Health, there was no healing. Remember when Sledge had breach charges? Remember when the game was fun? Because I don't, it's been a very long time since the game was fun. I mean, come on, Gain, it's not been fun since like year 3. I know, hot take, right? But seriously, this game used to be the best game in the market, okay? The best there ever was, okay? And then, it probably up until year 3, right guys? I mean, this is gonna be a rant, but since year 3, it's just been going downhill ever since. If you don't remember, or if you never played from, 2015 to 2018, then you may not know, Siege used to be a very, very slow tactical shooter. It did not have just rush in and get out and all this. Sure, people would meme and do that, but nothing compared to it is today. And remember recruits? Remember when you could pick anything you want and actually have fun? I understand Ubisoft changing that. But for example, why can't we do it in casual, okay? Why can't we pick whatever the hell we want in casual? Why does it have to be different there, huh?
Bruh.
And then they introduced the map ban system, which like, alright, I'm alright. Okay, look, I'm a favor of map bans. And that should have been in the game a long time ago. But why only between 3 maps originally, now between 5 maps? Why can't you just choose the map like in most other shooters? And then if you're like, oh, they don't want to be like Call of Duty, bullshit!
That's what they became!
That's what made them bad, alright? They literally were this, it used to be this unique shooter where you could go in and get with the squad of 5, and sure, there were some bugs and some wacky stuff, but you went around the wacky stuff, because the wacky stuff is what made the game fun. Jaeger having ACOG, Ash having ACOG, and, a lot of these overpowered things is what made the game fun. And whenever you try to fix an overpowered thing, or at least when Ubisoft does it, you just create something more overpowered. And that's generally what they've been doing ever since. And ever since 2018, it's gotten more child-friendly and safer. Everything in the game is safer, right? We can't say terrorists anymore, okay? That's bad. We can't say terrorists. And then, we take terrorists out of the game. You took the suicide bomber from Terrorist Hunt out of the game, who was terrifying but awesome, and actually made Terrorist Hunt, kind of fun and thrilling at times. And, the C4 all around the buildings. Yeah, made it harder, but it was fun, and there was a difficulty that made it easier. So I don't see the reason in removing stuff like that, and yet they did. And then they removed more customization, and they added more operators that were more and more unrealistic. When the original devs, who are not working there, by the way, anymore, ever since 2018, wonder if that had something to do with it. Ever since they left, they promised that we were gonna get the most realistic game possible, okay? We're gonna get, okay, that's a little bit of exaggeration. But they were gonna keep it at least a little bit realistic to, like, special forces, right? At least the special forces, the gadgets, stuff like that would be semi-realistic. And we're dancing around with chicks that can go invisible now. Okay, like just invisible and have holograms of themselves. And the first thing was Echo that kind of introduced this with his little, little drone action that makes you drunk. Yeah, that guy, he started it, but we let it slide. We're like, all right, they're just getting creative now. Maybe in a world like you could do that. That's possible. Then Lion and Finka happened. And people try to make excuses all throughout the Rainbow Six world about this, but truly it was the downfall. It was the beginning of the downfall, and it's just not been the same since. Ever since you could start tracking people through walls for some unknown reason. Then, and with an indestructible drone that couldn't be shot in the sky, things started taking a turn in more areas than one. For example, this was around the time that they actually had that Chinese fiasco. Anyone remember that? Anyone a Siege fanatic that has been there since the beginning and remembers the time, I believe at the beginning of year 3, when they tried to sell out to the Chinese, because the Chinese were like, we don't want the citizens getting wacky ideas about being rebellious toward the government, so we kind of want you to take out the knife, take out a lot of the blood, if not all of it, and then take out certain aspects of the game that make it, more violent, because it's not for their viewers, okay? The commies tried to get involved, and Ubisoft was legitimately going to implement this. Instead of making a separate copy of the game, they were going to implement this into everyone's game, okay? Everyone's game. That's pretty insane, Todd, wouldn't you say? Thank you. He agrees. Anyway, the unreal management at Ubisoft causes all these things to happen, and then, people were up in a rage about that, so much so that this is the old Siege community. They've just forced Ubisoft to not do this, because if you don't know, most of the original players of Rainbow Six Siege, actually a big part of Rainbow Six Siege was military people, and across militaries around the world, obviously mainly America, but there's a lot of military people from around the world that were either in the military or retired from the military playing this game, because it was one of the more realistic shooters. Not the most realistic, but it was a realistic, good shooter at the time for a couple years. And so that was a big part of your player base was that. And at the beginning of year 3, it was still like that. So people took to forums on Ubisoft and they wrote about it, and Ubisoft ended up completely caving and was like, we're sorry, issued a classic apology, and then made a separate area, or a separate digital and disc for the Chinese version of the game, which is what they should have done in the first place, but they're lazy, so they were going to try to get away with it, which I understand from a business perspective, but still, you're really shooting yourselves in the foot there. And then from there, we have I like to say, the coddening, okay? All right? Where they made the game more and more like Call of Duty and more like Battlefield in a lot of aspects of the game. And this is when they introduce more healing into the game, like with Finka, for example. Then they introduced a lot more futuristic characters. And they were focusing on a broader player base because they were shoring up their player base, because they had pretty much had everyone from the market that they originally targeted. And so they needed to expand naturally. And so what they tried to do then was make the game safer and better, is what they were trying to think in their heads, all right? Safer means better. So we're going to take away the fun things, and we're going to attempt to fix things and make things more futuristic and faster pace. And that's exactly what they did over the course of 4 or 5 years, pushing out players like me and replacing them with a broader player base, like a lot of Call of Duty and Battlefield players. Like, whatever, Call of Duty is Call of Duty. I'm not hating on Call of Duty. I'm only hating, and in fact, I'm hating on Rainbow Six Siege, trying to be Call of Duty. It was better when it was its own thing. And it's still its own thing in a lot of rights. Sure, it's not exactly a ripoff. But another big issue they started to do was, unfortunately, they started making a lot of money in the pro scene, because this attracted a lot of hardcore players, this game. And so the pro scene happened. And when esports happened, when they really kicked off on that, that was the downfall from there. I mean, that was horrible. That also happened bigly in year 3. And once that happened, my God, just every change in the game they were making for a solid 2 years was based off of what Pro League would do and think. Because Pro League's revenue is what moved Ubisoft to make decisions that were not in the best interest of players. And that's when a lot of changes occurred. Like, for example, this is when they started doing the map reworks, because they were too lazy to create their own maps that were too good, and I'll give them, they were releasing maps too often, and that was causing problems, as well as operators. That is one good thing they did, was slow down how often they were going to do that, but they should have done that a lot sooner, and they didn't. And what ended up happening was they started, instead of releasing new maps, they started doing reworks on old maps. There's a couple good reworks, I will admit, but there are a couple really bad ones. And the fact that you can't really go back and play them, they should just be in casual. Why not put them in casual, the old maps? It shouldn't matter. Casual does not matter, yet they're not there. For example, the Old House, remember the Old House? That was one of the best, most favorited maps in the game. And they decided to change it for esports purposes. And they did the same thing with Canal and Oregon. Also, 2 of the most favorite maps at the time. And they decided to rework these things, and then they reworked Brazil, they reworked a bunch of different maps, and this is what caused people like me to just be like, well, it seems like you're neutering every aspect of the game, that on top of, removing sites from people, and then adding different things to different people, and taking away abilities from some people, and nerfing people into oblivion, because they constantly did that. They nerfed someone way too much, and they buffed someone way too high. And then when they were constantly changing this, every single update, for example, there was a recoil change to Jaeger, Bandit, Ash. There was constantly a change to certain characters, and they were constantly causing you to switch up your game and have to relearn things. And then a lot of times, every time people found an exploit with it, because of course they're going to. It doesn't matter what you do, people are going to find an exploit for something. I just don't understand it. Like, for example, here, let's go to the world's most trusted website, Reddit. All right, guys, let's see here. Okay, here we go. We get here. Look at this. Okay. For example, better in a lot of ways, worse in a few really big ways, and this guy's a turning of tides opinion. In my opinion, things like shooting range, arcade modes, changing of colors in your team, and Vertical 5 map ban, and such have contributed to a better game. However, the TDM meta and Ranked 2.0 have completely fricked my chances of enjoying the game. Yes, this is unbelievably stupid that they have done this. And then this guy says, Limit, rather. It's gotten worse. It used to be a slow-paced, methodical, tactical shooter. It got boiled down to a TDM speed-oriented esport. Sure, it's done wonders to the player base, monetization, very good point, but ultimately, the basics that started it were the best and were great, in his opinion. Again, they really, and then obviously, then they jumped into the Battle Pass meta, and they were doing a lot of wacky things with the Battle Pass, and then now you don't get the annual pass, now you get the Battle Pass, and it's all confusing, and then it's like you gotta grind to get the certain things you want, and it's a lot of focus around skins. They reworked a lot of that aspect of it, and it ruined the game. They changed so much. That Siege is not, I mean, I play it today, it's really not at all like it was when I originally played it, and when I played it for 3 years. It's just not at all the same. Like, let's go over here. The Recruit rework, yeah, see there, the house rework. Yellow Ping, that's a good one there by Drubin222. Like, look guys, it's seriously, it's shameful really that it has done what it's done, honestly. This is just a quick rant. I mean, I'm not saying throw hate at Ubisoft necessarily, but they do create a lot of problems, okay? And this is one of the things they cause. And it's just disgraceful. They just kind of, I mean, it seems for the sake of monetization, which I guess is understandable, they just completely threw away the culture that was originally there. And if you played during those 3 years, the first 3 years, I think you will fully understand what I'm talking about. It used to be a game that was awesome that you could get with your friends and play, and it was just so fun, and like the exploits and stuff of the game that actually made it fun, like the running out and you had 5 seconds before you're detected and stuff. And especially if you played casual a lot, you'd have people doing a lot of really fun stuff with the exploits and with like the shield stuff. And I'm not saying, a lot of that stuff should have been fixed, but a lot of it could have been better, and they didn't have to change a lot of it. And they ended up changing too much, in my opinion, and it just ended up not being a game. It ended up not being the game it originally was. And it's just lost all of its roots. I mean, this is true with all of Ubisoft's titles, from Far Cry to Assassin's Creed to now Rainbow Six Siege. They lost their roots. And instead of creating another game, they could have created another game and gone this whole direction with that and did the Battle Pass and did all of these wacky things that they wanted to do in another game, but they weren't going to do that because not many people would have liked it. They wouldn't have had the 3 million player base to start out, and be a lot harder to compete in the market without that jump. That's my little rant about Siege. I could go days on this stuff, and you might disagree. If you do, leave a comment below. But other than that, I'm wearing a brown version of Todd's jacket over there, and I'm not really sure if he appreciates that, but I would like to thank Saint Danny DeVito for watching over me during these troubling times. And anyway, guys, I'll see you on the other side.